Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. We're here today to do the book nostalgia tag. I was tagged way back in September last year by Sean the Book Maniac. So thank you, Sean, for tagging me. And sorry it's taken me so long to get to it. But because I recently went to Jamaica, I had a little bit of a bout of nostalgia, both getting there and coming back home to New York. And so it made me think back to the book nostalgia tag, and so now I'm doing it. I have a lot of things about the trip to share with you guys. Haven't gotten around to that yet, but yeah, just to tell you that I've experienced some serious nostalgia. Just kind of going back into the home where my parents live. It's not my childhood home because my parents and I moved to a new house about 3 or so years before I left home. So I grew up in one house, and maybe about 3 years before I left Jamaica to come to New York, we all moved to this newer house, and that's where my parents live now. So my childhood home is still there. There was a lot of damage to that house or the contents of the house during a recent hurricane. So, and I say recent because it happened in the last, like, say, 20 years. As you get older, recent becomes a bigger chunk of time. So yeah, a lot of my memories from my childhood are lost. And going home to where the house where my parents live now, there's access to things that remind me of my childhood, but a lot of the things that I actually did use and books that I would have read are just no longer there. So nostalgia is a little bit of a mixed bag these days where visiting my home in Jamaica is concerned. But yeah, so we're here today to talk about book nostalgia and the books that make us feel a little nostalgic, and maybe the books that we turn to when we feel nostalgic. So there are 9 bookish prompts, and a prompt to tag some people, and yeah, we'll get to the tag at the end. But yeah, so these are the 10 prompts. Oops, here's the book. So I made a little jotting in my notebook. Book nostalgia tag, Sean the Book Maniac. The original tag, I should mention, was done by Noel of Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse. I'm not familiar with that channel, but I will go check out that video soon. You know, I have a toddler and except when she's sleeping like she is right now, I just don't have a lot of time to get online and watch videos these days, but it's all good. So let's get to the books. So the first prompt is the oldest book from your life that you still own. And so yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of my books from my past in Jamaica, I no longer own, but I did bring a copy of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights from Jamaica to New York when I traveled here. This is the book I was reading on the plane when I moved to New York, and so I still have this copy. Cover is a little tattered, but I recently reread it. I did a buddy read of this with Columbus and Rosalie a year or 2 ago, and really enjoyed it. It made me want to read books that were inspired by it, but also really enjoyed some things about the story. It's a little convoluted, and it's probably not a book that everyone the reviews are mixed. Not everyone likes this book, but it makes me think of a time in my life. So yeah, I will always keep this book. I'll always treasure this book. It's one of the oldest literary texts that I own and continue to own. So yeah, that's my answer for prompt number 1. Prompt number 2 is interesting because it says your first loved library book. Now, I've been reading books from the library my entire life. My parents own a lot of books because my parents are both teachers, and my dad had like literary text from his college years. He attended university here in the United States, and he brought back some of those books to Jamaica. So he had books in his bookshelf, and I'll mention that a little later as well, that I remember seeing and wanted to read. But my parents were also, like I said, they were teachers, and my mom especially was a teacher in the primary school, or what you call elementary school here in the United States. And she had a lot of other duties, And she was the teacher who kind of oversaw or facilitated the school library. So we read books from the library all the time. My aunt, my mother's brother's wife, was also the community librarian. So we would go to the community library, Southfield Library, and I'd be able to check out books from there. And because the librarian is my aunt, we would be able to bypass the regular library loan time. So I check out a book and she just kind of put my card to the front, not in the slot where it would be timed. So if regular library loans were 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I would just be able to hold the book until the next time I came to the library, whenever that was, whether it was from one summer holiday to the next vacation, which would have been like a midterm or something like a month and a half later. So that was fine. So yeah, I've been reading books from the library my whole life is what I'm saying. So I don't remember all the books. I just don't remember all the books, whether I owned them or read them from the library. I just can't recall. But one of the first books that I read from the library from my school library when I started going to college here in the United States, one of the first library books that I remember reading was A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nasar. And it was based on the life of John Nash, who was this game theorist, and he had bouts of schizophrenia, and so he wasn't eligible to win the Nobel Prize when he was first considered, but his work was later used for an economics project, and he eventually won the Nobel Prize like 45 years later. But the story is about this brilliant mathematician and the kind of absent-minded professor habits that he had and tendencies. And I picked up the book. I didn't necessarily know the full story, but I picked up the book because it was about a mathematician, and my dad's a mathematician. And when I just came to New York, I was missing my family, like seriously. So I would read books that reminded me of them. So yeah, one of the first library books that I read and loved was A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nasar. You may be familiar with the movie version of the story because it was made into a big movie, starred Russell Crowe, and I think it won the Oscar that year. But yeah, that was my first library book, my first loved library book that I can remember from my adult years. So, my adult years here in the United States. So, prompt number 3, this is going longer than I expected, and we're only at number 3, a book given to you. And I've gotten lots of bookish gifts. But since I was tagged by Sean the Book Maniac, I wanted to pay tribute to Sean the Book Maniac with this prompt. And Sean has sent me several books over the years. Sean is awesome. Hi, Sean. Thank you for all the books. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for loving on me from all the way in Japan. And right now, I guess I'm feeling a little nostalgic about Sean because we all know Sean from living in Japan, and now Sean is moving back to this part of the world. He's coming back to Canada. He's coming back to Canada. But I really appreciate all the books that Sean sent me from Japan. One of which was Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. And Sean sent me this book because I had previously read something by the author, and he said he couldn't really get into this book, I think, and he thought maybe I would enjoy it. And I was really appreciative. I don't remember if I loved this particular story because I think Yasunari Kawabata's writing is a little complex. It's really central to Japan and Japan's experience. So I appreciate reading books that highlight other cultures. And even if I don't necessarily get all the references, I feel like it makes me just more aware of other people and other cultures. So yeah, really loved receiving this book. Sean also sent me Fear and Trembling by Emily Nothomb, another book which he didn't necessarily love, but he thought that I would enjoy because I had read and raved about 2 other books by Emily Nothomb that I'd read from the library, incidentally. So that could have been for prompt number 2 as well. But I'm not sure where that book is right now. I wanted to show it here because that one is also Japanese because Emily Nothomb was in Japan, spent some time in Japan, and she wrote that book. But she's not Japanese by heritage, I guess. So yeah, 2 books that remind me of Sean the Book Maniac and maybe make me a little nostalgic because, like I said, Sean is moving away. So go check out Sean's channel if you don't already follow him. Prompt number 4, book that was recommended to you, and I'm on BookTube. I get book recommendations all the time, but I wanted to just pay homage to my family with this prompt because this is about nostalgia, and like I said, serious trip down nostalgia lane or memory lane recently. So a couple of books that remind me of my parents, recommendations, I think. First is Roots by Alex Haley, because that was one of the books that my dad read in college and had in our house in the bookshelf for my entire childhood. And when I was probably too young to read that book, I was in my early teens, I read Alex Haley's Roots and it traumatized me, but it also made me feel very literarily accomplished for reading such a huge book. I don't have a copy, but Alex Haley's Roots is a big book, and it is, the story of Kunta Kinte, and an American man who traces, African American man who traces his roots back to Africa, and yeah, it's deep, it's profound, it is moving. And it's also probably potentially traumatizing, but it makes me think about my dad. Having read that book and talking about it makes me remember my dad, and remember the books that he had when I was a child. Then there's a book that my mom recommended to me, even though she hadn't read it at the time. She told me about it, and so I got a copy and I sent her a copy, and then I got my own copy, and so we've both read it and we love it. This is From Harvey River, a memoir of my mother and her island by Lorna Goodison. And this one came up in conversation recently because Lorna Goodison is a Jamaican author, and she comes from a very dynamic family. Her sister, I think her older sister, used to be a very influential radio personality in Jamaica. She used to run this call-in program on the radio that my parents listened to like almost every day when I was growing up. And so I felt like I knew this lady, Barbara Gloudon, who's Lorna Goodison's sister, and who she mentions in her memoir. And sorry, just trying to make the picture come out a little clearer. So Barbara Gloudon died while I was in Jamaica last week. And so we started talking a little bit about the family and Lorna Goodison herself. They were showing an interview that Lorna Goodison had done, I guess previously, about her sister and her sister's career and how she places in the family and so on. And so it made me think about this book. And like I said, we talked about it. So yeah, that makes me, think about my mom and my childhood and stuff like that. There's another book that I would say was recommended to me by my brother, but I'll mention that in a later prompt. Prompt number 5 is a buddy read text. And I have lots of buddy reads that have been going on for a long time. But one of, I guess, my most significant buddy reads here on BookTube, YouTube, my bookish life, is my buddy reading group that continues to go on with Patrice and Heidi and Doris. Heidi from My Reading Life, Doris from Aldi Books, and Patrice Jones. She doesn't have a BookTube channel, but she's really active here, so you probably all know her. And I think we started off reading The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. We've read lots of other books in the years since then, but this book makes me think about the group, and we've become just like such close friends in the time since we did that buddy read. So yeah, makes me nostalgic, but it's also influential on the rest of my life. So yeah, had to mention that. And my friends, hi ladies. And prompt number 6 is a book or books that you were introduced to in school. This is a novel that I read in a literature class when I was in high school. I think I was about 14 or 15 at the time when we read this book, and I've been thinking about it pretty much my entire life since then. And so we recently read this book for the RunwrightReads book club. We read this last year, and it's just as great as I remember. And all the other participants in the book club agreed that they enjoyed this book. And so we want to read more from Earl Lovelace. He is still alive. He's, I think, in his 90s. He is from Trinidad. and I haven't read anything else from him. I want to, but just reading this book and thinking about this book and talking about this book makes me remember my literature class when I was in high school, and my teacher, who was a literature teacher, but obviously he didn't love Caribbean literature. He didn't love literature like I think you should love it in order to inspire young people. So I didn't treasure the experience of reading the book with a group as I think we could have, but I love the book. So yeah, still love it, still recommending it. The Wine of Astonishment by Earl Lovelace. And of course, it makes me think about my childhood, even if not in very nostalgic ways. Prompt number 7 is genre fiction that inspires nostalgia. Now, I don't read a lot of genre fiction, but I'm going to say children's books, middle grade aged books, or books that are just geared maybe towards children, but that highlight the Caribbean experience. So a book like that I read recently, Karine Getton's When Life Gives You Mangoes. This one is set in Jamaica, even though it doesn't say it's in Jamaica. It's set in rural Jamaica, and we have a young girl who is talking about, well, the book is about her life in like a summer vacation and her friends and what life is like in this rural community, and what happens when there are traumatic things that happen and the adults don't talk about it. All of that reminds me of my childhood. So this one was a gift from the author a couple of years ago, and I read it and I loved it. But other books like that, Escape to Last Man Speak by Jean D'Acosta, is a book that I read when I was a child, and my mother recently reread it. My mom has a copy of the book. When I went to Jamaica a couple of weeks ago, I saw my mom's copy, and I thought about borrowing it. But I said, nah, I'm going to leave it, because I was hoping that we'd be able to go to the bookstore down there and I'd be able to get a copy for myself, and we just didn't get around to it. But yeah, had to mention Escape to Last Man Speak by Jean D'Acosta. Prompt number 8, literary work that inspires nostalgia. I'm going to go with some classics, specifically works of Charles Dickens, because Charles Dickens' books were a big part of my library, my home library when I was growing up. And just seeing books like A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations, which I don't own a copy of yet. But those two books were part of my father's library specifically. And I remember he had these 2 copies of those 2 Charles Dickens books, these 2 hardcover copies that I looked at. There were these orange covers. And I'd look at them and I'd say, man, when I get old enough, I'm going to read those books. I feel like being an adult means reading those books. And it wasn't until I was a serious adult in my 30s when I finally picked up one of those books, and then later reading the other one. But it makes me think about those books in our library at home. And I wonder if my parents still have those. So that's prompt number 8. And prompt number 9 is a spiritual text that inspires nostalgia. And so here's where I'm going to mention a book that I'd say was recommended to me by my brother, because this is a book that my brother read when he was in second form. So he was about 12 or 13 years old when he read this book. And I, as a kiddo, because I'm 4 years younger than my brother, I saw him reading this book and I got interested in what he was reading. And this is a book about mythology, Greek mythology, Rex Warner's Men and Gods. And I tried to read all the books that my brother was reading, because like I said, I was a bookworm. I was been a bookworm my whole life, and I just always wanted to read whatever the other people around me were reading. So my brother was reading this book for school, and I read parts of this book for connection with my brother when I was about 8 or 9. So I thought about this book many times over the years. And when we went to Jamaica recently, I found this book in my parents' house. And so I took it. And the day when I was leaving, my brother had come to take us to the airport. And it was in my bag, and I was unpacking to look for something, unpacking my bag. And this came out, and I said, "Oh, Mark, I'm taking this." And he's like, "What? Where did you find that?" I was like, "Yeah, it's been here this whole time. So if you wanted it, you would have taken it. I'm taking it now." So yeah, I'm gonna call this a loan because maybe I'll read it and next time I go to Jamaica I'll bring it back so my brother can actually get it. But for now, I'm gonna say that this is a book that makes me nostalgic for that part of my life, and it's a spiritual text because it's about mythology, Greek gods. Rex Warner's Men and Gods. If you're looking for a book about mythology, it's short. It's 150 pages or so, 160 pages, and it introduces these Greek gods and talks about the stories about them, Theseus and the Minotaur, Daedalus and Icarus, and all of that. So yeah, I read a book about the mythology, another book recently, but I've been thinking about this and wanting this book for a long time. So yeah, those are 9 prompts about books and nostalgia, and prompt number 10 is to tag some people. But like, did I mention that this tag, Sean tagged me in September 2021? So I don't know who's done the tag, and so I'm gonna open it up to anyone who hasn't yet done the tag. But I'm also going to say, if Doris hasn't done the tag, then I'm going to ask Doris to do it. And if Heidi hasn't done the tag, I'll ask Heidi to do it. And I'd tag Patrice, which doesn't have a channel. So Patrice, if you'd like to do the tag, maybe you could just write your answers in the comments here or somewhere where we can check you out. You could put it on Instagram. Would love to know, how about I open it up to all the people that I've done buddy reads with. So if you've done a buddy read with me and you're watching this video, consider yourself tagged. So that would include Columbus and Rosalie and Kay and all the members of the book club. And Sean, well, I can't tag Sean because he's the one who tagged me. I don't know. There have been lots of people who have buddy read with over the years. So yeah, if you've buddy read the book with me, consider yourself tagged specifically. But even if you haven't done a buddy read with me and you want to do this tag, because it's fun, I think it's fun to just explore books from your past. Do the tag or comment down below. Let me know your answers so we can check them out and chat about the books that inspire you as well. So thank you so much for watching this video and looking forward to chatting with you. And until next time, happy reading. Bye.